The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. So before we get started, we want to make sure that our audio is working okay. So if you can hear me speaking, if you can raise your hand, that lets me know that you can hear me. Awesome. Thank you. And then you can go ahead and lower it because we will use that function when we call for stakeholder comments. Welcome and thank you for attending the State Electrical Board's stakeholder meeting via webinar today. The date is March 4th, 2022, and the time is 10:30 a.m. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm a regulatory analyst with the division. Also attending is Joyce Young, Program Director, and Elena Kemp, Regulatory Coordinator. Due to concerns surrounding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting revisions to the rules. More specifically, today we will be discussing multiple proposed changes to the State Electrical Board's rules pursuant to the rule review mandated by Section 24.103.3 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The purpose of the rule review is to assess the continuing need, appropriateness, and cost-effectiveness of the rules to determine if they should be continued in their current form, modified, or repealed. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the board's website by the close of business on Monday. As this stakeholder meeting is held solely by webinar, please raise your hand by using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you'll be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comment in the question section and we will read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, I want to ask that anyone providing comments please state your name and the name of the organization that you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 to 5 minutes and try not to repeat something that was already said. Stating you're in full agreement with someone else works just fine and will be noted. If you are using audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. So at this point in time, before we get started, I'll just walk through the proposed changes to the rules to give you an idea of why certain changes were made, and then we will call for stakeholder comments. So the board has already reviewed these rules to give you a better understanding of the process. And then at this point in time, we are seeking stakeholder feedback regarding the proposed changes. The feedback received today will be presented to the board at the board's next meeting. After that, if the board makes any additional changes, then we will have another stakeholder meeting. And then finally, it will result in the rulemaking hearing so 2 meetings out for the board. So the first section here is an added rule 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. So 1.1 is a new rule. These first 3 rules are to comply with the Secretary of State's styling manual. Under authority, you can see it just gives the board's authority to promulgate the rules. Scope and purpose, the board already had a statement of basis in its rules, so we just updated that title to be scope and purpose. And then the third rule, applicability, also is to be consistent with the Secretary of State's styling manual. And then the fourth rule, definitions, that's how Secretary of State's styling manual is structured. The board already had terms defined in rule. So no changes there, just making the structure meet the Secretary of State's styling manual. You can see at the beginning of each rule, we changed the language to this rule is promulgated pursuant to sections and then included the statutory authority for each rule to make it easier for people to look at the statute if you wanted to, and then also to be consistent with other boards and programs and how the rules are written. So you can keep scrolling, Elena. I'll jump in where there are changes that I want to point out. And while Elena scrolls, so during this process, this is an opportunity for stakeholders to present any issues that you find with the rules for the board's consideration. We are looking at the statutory criteria that we mentioned earlier, and that's guiding the board's decision making in this process. But this is an opportunity for all the rules to be on the table and for stakeholders to weigh in on anything that's problematic in the rules. And you can see too in that, like, a comment when we try to make it as transparent as possible, when the board reviewed it, what the board's decision was, so that stakeholders can see and track along through this process. Keep going, Elena. Where you're seeing the statutes dropped in comments, those are just to help members of the public and also the board to make sure that there is no conflict between the board's rules and the statute. So it just makes it easier to read. Those will be removed when the board ultimately decides to adopt the proposed changes. Other comments posed on the side are just for stakeholders to weigh in, questions from the board, questions on structure, how the rules should be set up. General cleanup there. The division is trying to update all board and program rules to not use gender pronouns, gender specific pronouns, and change them to gender neutral pronouns, or as you can see, his or her to the individual. So you'll see that throughout the rules as well. And that takes us to the end. So hopefully that helps give you an idea of quickly what the board is considering. But at this point in time, we will open the floor to stakeholder comments. So if you would like to provide any comments regarding the proposed changes, now is your chance to do that. And you can raise your hand and we can unmute your line, or you can type into the question function of the webinar and we can read your comments out loud for other members who are listening and also for the recording. while we just wait to see if anyone wants to provide any comments, throughout this entire process, you heard me mention at the beginning that this meeting is recorded and will be posted on the board's website. So we do post all rulemaking activity on the board's website under the Public Notices tab. And then we also, if there is an upcoming meeting or rulemaking hearing, stakeholder meeting or rulemaking hearing, those are noticed on the board's website under the Public Notices tab on the board's calendar, and then an email is sent to all licensees and stakeholders. We will continue to post written comments as we receive them, so just keep an eye on that Public Notices tab on the board's website, and we will continue to accept written comments as well throughout this process. Those are given to the board in advance of the meetings where they consider the proposed changes, and then also, of course, the rulemaking hearing. So I'll go ahead and wait a few more minutes just to make sure we don't miss anyone, since sometimes the webinars can be hard to figure out all the different functions. So I'll just go ahead and pause until 10:44, and if we don't have any one with the hand raised or any written comments, then we'll go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Alrighty, so I don't see that anyone would like to provide any comments, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for participating in today's meeting. As part of this collaborative process, all comments and program recommendations will be provided to the board for review before the next board meeting on March 30th, 2022. Then any additional rule revisions from the board will be presented to stakeholders at the next stakeholder meeting on April 29th, 2022. The board will deliberate on the final version of the rules at the permanent rulemaking hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for May 25th, 2022. As always, you're welcome to submit written comments to Dora_DPO_rulemaking at state.co.us. That concludes this stakeholder meeting. Thank you again for your participation. And we are going to end the webinar now.